session. Today's session we will discuss about the different types of looping statements in Python. So these are the different looping statements we will discuss today: while with else, for, nested loop, jump, break, continue and pass. So first let's try to understand what is a loop. So loop is a block of code that is recurring for a stated number of times until some condition is encountered. So in a loop's body, the code, the place which is placed inside the loop will be carried out repeatedly. So what is the purpose of loop? So when we are doing programming, so what happens in the process of programming? We will be composing the problem statement, we will be drawing flowcharts, we'll be designing, we'll be doing coding, we'll be writing our program, we will analyze and evaluate the software, there will be technical writing, there'll be software update. And most of these designing when we are doing, there'll be certain amount of instructions that may have to be executed a certain number of times. So that those kinds of statements we enclose within loops. So the benefits of going for loop is, the first one is reusability, right? You can reuse when you have a set of statements which have to be executed again and again. Instead of simply writing the same thing again and again, you can just write it once and execute it multiple times. So reusability is a very good advantage. The second one is you can avoid writing lengthy codes and put those set of statements within a loop. So complex problems becomes very simple, and it also helps in crisscrossing the elements placed in arrays. So very useful, loops are very useful when we are working with arrays and lists. And therefore it avoids excessive lengthy repetitive codes, and therefore we will have finally a very small instruction, simple program where a set of instructions are executed repeatedly. So coming to the flow control, the iteration, this diagram shows the classification of the flow control. The iteration or basically the looping, okay, iteration or looping is normally based upon a counter or a condition, right? That means a set of statements will be executed repeatedly, mainly based upon, or it can be because of a counter, okay? And loops are divided into two branches, that is infinite loops and finite loops. You can have infinite loops where the loop is executed continuously infinitely, or you have finite loops. Loops are again branched out into two types, definite and indefinite. So in again indefinite loops, we will be classifying that into entry control loops and exit control loops. So entry control loops means the condition is tested before the commencement of the loop. And in exit control loop, the condition is tested after in functions for looping, lines 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 for looping, like the Python basically has four functions for looping. One is the user defined functions, the second one is the anonymous or the lambda functions, third one is a recursive function, and the fourth one is a built-in functions. Now Python 3.x version and above, they have 68 built-in functions for looping. Okay, now let's start with the each of the looping statements. But before that, let's try to understand a function called as range function. So this is a syntax of range. Can have three arguments: start, stop and step. Okay, so range has three arguments. Start is the first argument, stop is the second argument, third one is a step. Now start and step is optional. Okay, so that means first is the default, it means 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 the default value is 0. Now the second argument stop is required, it's mandatory. You have to mention the second argument. It is an integer number where you specify at what position you want to stop the looping, as the word itself says stop. So that means where you want to stop the looping. The third argument is step, which is also optional. Basically this will tell the increment, how you want to increment. You want to increment by a step size of 1 or 2 or 3. Now this is optional. If it is not specified, the default value is 1. Okay, range is start, stop, step. Three arguments. Start and step is optional. Only the stop is mandatory. Start, if it is not mentioned, the default value is 0. Step, if it is not mentioned, the default value or the step size is 1. So let's look into some examples to understand this. So as I said, the middle one shows actually all the three arguments. So if I write something like this, x is equal to range of 3, 20, 2, that means when you are looping, you're starting with a starting number of 3, right? And you're incrementing with a step size of 2. So next I've written a for loop for n in x. So what would be the values of x it will take? It will take the value of 3 and it will go up to, it will not, when you say 20, the 20 would not be taken, it would be 19. Okay, and the step size is 2. Therefore, since I'm printing the value xx, what are the values of x that you can see now is 3, increase by 2, 5, 7, 9, like that you go on increasing till 19. So these are the possible values. Now this example shows only 2 arguments. So that means the first argument is 3. So that means that is a start value. The second value is 6. So that means it is a stop value. So the value of x now would be 3, right? And it will go up to, as I said, it will go up to last one here, only 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 one argument is given. So that means only the stop value is given. So that means start default value would be taken. As I said, start, if it is not mentioned, then the default value is 0. Step size, if it is not mentioned, the default value is 1. So that means the value of x here would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As I said, 6 would not be taken. Only 1, it will go only up to 5. So this is an example of range function. So coming to the next one, while loop. See, while loop is again a condition controlled. This is the syntax. What is the syntax? While condition is true. If the condition is true, then the statements which are under while loop will be executed. If the condition is false, these statements are not executed. It will go to the next statement after this. Okay, so this is a simple example here. I is equal to 1. While I less than 6, remember to put a colon here. And then you can see 2 statements are part of the while condition. Indentation, you have to be very careful in Python because there are no curly brackets. So these 2 statements are part of the while condition. First time, 1 is less than 6. Yes, so 1 is printed. Next, 1 is incremented by 1. This is I is equal to I plus 1. Again, it goes on repeating this loop until I is equal to the output. What would be the output? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the second one is while loop with else. So it is just similar to the previous one, except that now you have a else condition here. So this is the syntax. Okay. So the same program has been altered here. While I less than 6. Until I value is less than 6, it will go on printing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once I becomes 6, these 2 statements would not be executed. It will come to the else part and it will print I is no longer less than 6. So this is the output. So if this question is asked, please write the flow chart. Condition is true, execute these true block statements. Condition is false, execute the else block statements and then proceed. Okay, so this is a flow chart of while loop. So coming to the next one, for loop. Now for loop is used for iterating over a sequence. The sequence can be a list, it can be a tuple, it can be a dictionary, it can be a set or iterable, 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 iterable. Now this iterable can be anything. It can be a list, it can be a string, it can be a loop, it can be a dictionary or a set or a string. Okay, so we will see some examples to understand this. See, in this example, I am trying to iterate over a list. What is the list here? Fruits is equal to apple, banana, cherry. How do you know it's a list? Because it is covered with square brackets. Now I am writing the for loop. For X. As I said, the second one would be a variable. In fruits, fruits is something which is a sequence. In this case, it's a list. I'm just trying to print X. So what happens automatically, right? It will loop through all the elements in the list, and that would be passed on to variable X, and it will be printed. So the first time in the for loop, it will take the list of 0, with this is the 0th element of the list. That will be given into X, and apple is printed. Next banana is printed. Next cherry is printed. This is another example where we are trying to loop through a string. Okay, so here the sequence through which we are looping through is a string. How do you know it's a string? Because it's enclosed between double quotes. So print X. So what will happen? It will iterate character by character. Okay, so B, all the characters one by one would be printed here. So it is first time in the loop, X value will be B. The second time in the loop, the X value will be A. So like that it will iterate through the elements of the each character of the string. So that's the example of for loop. Coming next to the nested loop. Nested loop, as the word itself says, you can have loop within a loop. For example, here I have a for loop. Under that I will have some set of statements which belongs to the for loop. Under that I can have one more for loop. Okay, which is the inner loop. So you'll have an outer loop and an inner loop, and these are the statements of the inner loop. The same way I can have while loop. Under that I have for loop. For loop I have, which is the outer loop. Under that I have a while loop. In the third one I have a while loop outside. Under that I have a while loop. You can have in any way. For inside for inside while inside for, while inside while. These are all possible. We will see programs on this using nested loops next. Next we will see this. Now coming to the jump statements. Now there can be some times where we may want to pause, or I may want to terminate the execution. I may want to just exit from a body or a loop. So when you want to jump out of the normal execution, or you want to stop, or you want to exit, there are three types of jump statements which are very useful: break, continue, and pass. So let's see the first one, break. So the break is used to terminate a loop. Okay, if you want to terminate from a loop, you have to use break, and this is the syntax. Just break, you write break. So when it comes across break, the interpreter comes, a Python interpreter comes across break, it jumps out of that existing loop. So see this example. What we have done here, for I in range 1, 5. So what would be the possible values of I? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is the start value. 5 would be the stop value. So it goes from 1 to 3, 4. Under for loop, I have written a condition. If I is equal to 3, break. So when it comes across this break, what happens when the value of I becomes equal to 3? When it comes across break, it comes out of that loop. It is inside which loop? This is the loop. So it comes out of that. And this print I, you can see that it is outside the, it is outside if condition, but still it is part of the loop. So therefore it will not be executed. So what would be the output? 1, 2. 3 would not be printed, because if you notice this print, it is also under the for loop. So 3 would not be printed. Only 1 and 2 is printed. So I hope you got this. Break will cause the exit from that loop. Okay, it will come out of the for loop, and that now the control comes to the line after the loop. Now coming to the next one, continue. Now continue is used to end the current iteration in a for loop or a while loop and continue to the next iteration. So what happens is, it will not completely come out of the loop, unlike the break. It will just come out of that current iteration, and again it will repeat the loop. Okay, see here, I is equal to 0, why I less than 9? Yes, 0 is less than I. Now it will increment the value of I becomes 1. If I is equal to 3, is I equal to 3? No, 1 is not equal to 3. It will not execute continue, it will print I. So 1 is printed. Next, value of I is 2. 2 is less than I? Yes. Is 2 equal to 3? No. So continue is not executed, 2 is printed. Next time, now it is 3. Is I equal to 3? 3 equal to 3? Yes. Execute execute continue, and therefore what happens, terminate the from this current it will end this current iteration, but it will still continue the while loop, and therefore what happens, the rest of the statements which was part of the loop will not be executed. So which statement? Print I will not be executed, and that is why you will not see the value 3 here, but again it will repeat the loop. That is why you can see the output of this program is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 and 9 also is printed. Okay, but 3 is not printed. Why 9 is printed is where I is equal to 9, it will come here. You can see that print it will be printed. The reason is when suppose we have 8 less than 9. Yes, now I is equal to I plus 1. Now it will become 9. 9 is not equal to 3, and that's why it gets printed. Okay, so output is 1 to 9, but see 3 is not printed except for 3, because when I becomes equal to 3 we gave a continue, and therefore it just ended that current loop. Okay, and this is the flow chart of continue statement. So if this question is asked, you have to write this entire slide, explain the concept, syntax, program, and the flow chart. Pass statement. Now pass is actually a very interesting concept. Basically remember, pass is like a placeholder. Okay, it's a placeholder. It's just to write something there, we have it, but nothing gets executed here. This means that if I want to write a piece of code in somewhere, but I just want to keep a space empty. Okay, but we cannot keep the space empty. See, I want to write a piece of code, maybe later I will write something in that code. Okay, I'm writing my code, and there are some statements which as of now I do not know. Maybe later I will fill it. So in that case, just put pass. So basically it is holding that place, but nothing is getting executed. So in order to avoid getting an error, you can't just leave empty spaces, right? For example, in the next sessions when you learn class, right? A class can contain functions and variables. So as of now, I don't want to have any variable or functions in my class, so I can't leave it empty. If I want to write an empty class, just put pass under that class. It will not give you an error. Later at any time you can write, or you may not write also, but if you want to have some kind of an empty space and still not get an error, put a pass statement. So it's a very interesting concept. So basically this is very much useful. Pass statement is very much useful when we are implementing classes, or I want to write empty loops, I want to write empty control statements or empty functions, which I may fill it up later, right? I may write the function later, but I'm creating it the prototype now. Then write the function name, under that you put pass. So you see this example here for alphabet in legend. So basically here it will be traversing right through these characters, right? And if alphabet is G, I'm giving pass, else print. So basically what happens, everything gets printed here except G, because when first time L is printed, next E is printed, when alphabet is equal to G, actually nothing happens. It doesn't go to the else. Since it doesn't go to else, G doesn't get printed. Again the loop, nothing. So nothing, pass is doing nothing. Basically it's a placeholder. Okay, in simple words, pass is an empty holder. It is not executing something. We use this whenever we want to create some empty loops, empty classes, empty functions, which we may want to fill in up later. That's the easiest concept. So pass is actually a very interesting statement. So now let's try to find out the differences between pass and continue. So pass is basically a null statement, but continue, it's not a null statement. Null, pass is null because it's not zero, it's not doing anything, that's all. So pass is a placeholder for future use. Continue, it's not a placeholder. Pass statement informs the Python interpreter regarding the non-availability of the code. That means there is no code there, but please don't generate an error. Continue jumps, basically tells the interpreter that you jump to the top line of the loop. What happens in continue? It will exit only it will end that current execution. It will not execute any statement after that which belongs to the loop, but it will still continue the loop. Now pass statement passes the implementation to the following statement, but continue will force the loop to start the next iteration. It will end the current iteration and start the next iteration. So pass does not perform any action, it does nothing, but continue basically performs jumping to the next iteration. Now pass is mandatory when syntactically needed, right, but practically not. So syntactically yes, right, I want a class but I don't have anything under that, so it's mandatory that I put pass. I cannot just write class name and leave it empty, it will give error. So that is why syntax wise I need pass. Now continue is needed when we want to skip the execution of the current iteration. Now pass keyword is a no operation keyword, but continue is used to resume the loop at the control point. So these are the differences between pass and continue. Now let's start with some programs which are using different kinds of loop. The first one is program for verbal announcement in exam room. So suppose in the exam room you want to give an announcement that okay, now the exam is going to finish within 10 minutes, 8 minutes, 7 minutes, like that. So we are writing a program for that. So let's go to the Jupyter notebook. Okay, so this is a program for exam announcement. So initially let's say the time left is, which I'm giving to a variable called at minutes left, is equal to 9. While 9 is greater than 0, you say exam will end in, see I'm using here string concatenation operation, right? This is a string, this is another string. I will display here exam will end in, this is another string, minutes from. Now I'm going to put the time in between, so that time would be in minutes left. Now since it's an integer, you have to do typecasting, put str. So what will happen first time, exam will end in 9 minutes from now. Next you do minutes left is equal to minutes less minus 1. So the loop will continue until the value is equal to 0. So until 1 it will come. So once the value minutes left becomes equal to 0, it says it will come out of the while loop and it will print this students exam has finished, hand over the answer paper. So this program is an example of while loop. So let's write another program where we are going to print all the integers under 6. Okay, so let's say you're asked to print all the integers under 6 using the while else loop. So how do we do this, right? I have to print all the integers under 6. Okay, so let me first initialize I is equal to 1. Is 1 less than or equal to 6? Yes. So let's say while loop is executed. Again I'm using string concatenation. Now first time it is 1 number of times. Next I'm going to increment I. Now 2. Next 3, 4, 5, 6. So till 6 is equal to 6, this statement would be executed. Next time I will become 7 and it will say I is greater than 6, hence exit. So I'm quickly trying to execute or explain all these programs. Go through all this. Exams, in the examination any kind of programs can be asked, so you should be aware, you should be ready to execute. So more you execute, you'll get a more knowledge about writing the programs. So let's see the next program. This is a program to sum the numbers from 1 to n using for loop and range. Okay, so let's say I want to add up all the numbers from 1 to n. Let's say I take n is equal to 2000. Okay, let's say simple number, n is equal to 20. Since I have to sum, I am also creating a variable called as sum, which is 0. Now the question they have asked you to use for loop and range. So how do you do it? Here for count, I discussed all the syntaxes right now. So count is basically the variable, in this is the sequence. Here you can have list, you can have tuples, you can have characters, you can also have range. Since they've asked you to use range, we have used range here. So count will take values from, this would be the start value 1, this would be the stop value. So range would take values from 1 to 21 here. So count will increment from 1 to 21. So first time 0, 0 plus 1. So what will be the sum value? 1. Next again it will repeat to the earlier value of sum, 1 plus 2, 3. Next 4 plus 2. Like that it goes on adding up until the range is completed. So that means this loop will be executed from 1 to, this is 21, right? So 1 to 20. Okay, we discussed about range. The range value here is 1, 21. So the looping would be from 1 to 20. So finally the answer would be, okay, sorry, this one, the answer would be 210. So sum of numbers from 1 until 20 is 210. So now let's see the next program. Suppose I want to find a factorial of a set of numbers. See, I am finding the factorial of not one number. I am going for some sequence of numbers and using nested loops. So they have told you have to do this using nested loops. So how do you do it? So this is the program to find factorial using nested loop. So nested, I have, this is the outer for loop, this is the inner for loop. So how do you find factorial of a number? Like this, right? What is factorial of 4? 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. Right? Like that you have, what is a factorial of 5? 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. So that's basically the way you calculate the factorial. So that's what we are doing now. Since we have to do for a set of numbers, right, I am taking the value of n as range from 1 to 5. So I am going to find factorial of numbers from 1 to 5. I am going to find factorial of 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So this is the outer loop for looping through this 1 to 5. Okay, so first time it will find the factorial of 1. So it will come here. What is a factorial of 1 is, I am also creating one more variable called as multiplication variable here, which should be initially 1. Okay, see, whenever you are doing any kind of addition, you have to initialize sum is equal to 0. Whenever you need to do multiplication, you should take mul is equal to 1. If you take 0, then your answer will be 0. So take multiplication is equal to 1. So under that I am writing one more for loop because I have to do, suppose I have to find factorial 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. For that reason one more for loop, and the range of this would be, it should start from 1. The concept is we will be doing reverse. 1, then I'm going on incrementing. So that's why my range is starting from 1 and then I'm going on incrementing. J plus 1. So what is J here? First time it is 1, right? So 1 to 2. Next time it will be 1 to 3, next 1 to 4, like that it will go on incrementing, and then multiplication will happen here. So multiplication, first time it is 1 into 2, next it will be 2 into 3, next it will be 3 into 4, like that it will repeat. So this for loop will be executed, and then once it is done the multiplication will be printed. Right, that is the first one. Next again it will repeat for the next number for which we are doing the factorial. Next again it will repeat for the next number. Next again it will increase for the next number. So this is an example of nested for loop. Now coming to the break statement, I've already told you break will cause the termination of the current loop, right? So they've given a question to illustrate break statement, right? So this is an example for x in range of 5. So what is the value of range? Range, just one number is given, therefore that means this is a stop value. So the value of range would be from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Under that I am initializing one variable called as 4. So 4 greater than or equal to, first time it would be 0. Yes, 4 is greater than or equal to 0. Yes, and therefore need a break would be printed. Next I am initializing y is equal to 1. Then again I repeat the loop. Right? So I go on repeating this loop until the value of range, for the values of range of x from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what would be the values that is printed? 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. It will go on printing until, right? Now this is the example of indefinite loop, because what is happening is while y is greater than or equal to 0, y is 4. Right, first time the value of x is 0, so 4 is always greater than or equal to 0. So you can see here, if you see this execution, it's a indefinite loop, it going on executing. So break is a very good example. So they can ask you a question, illustrate break within an infinite loop. So if you want to come out of this infinite loop, just put this break statement under this while loop, and now when you execute you can see it will terminate. Okay, so break is very useful, especially when you are having infinite loops. So this while loop was an example of infinite loop. Okay, so I wanted to come out of it, so just give a break statement, so it will come out of the infinite loop. Now coming to the next one, usage of pass. As I already told you, pass is just a placeholder. So if instead of writing nothing, we put a pass there. See, this is an example here. We have created a tuple here. Why do we say it's a tuple? Because it's enclosed between parenthesis, for we are looping through a tuple for x in birds. First time the value of x would be peacock. Peacock is equal to duck? No. Right? In this case it is not equal, and therefore it will not execute this. It will come to the else part and it will print peacock. Next time, duck is equal to duck? Yes. And therefore what happened? It executed pass statement. Right? It executed pass statement. Basically nothing happened, but else did not get printed. Again it is repeating the loop, and therefore if you see the output, duck would not be printed in the output, but other things would be printed, sparrow and eagle. So basically pass here, this is an illustration of pass statement where it is doing nothing, right? It's doing nothing here. So basically the print text did not get printed, and therefore duck is not there in the output. So let's see a program. Suppose they ask you a program to find odd numbers using for, else and pass statement. Okay. So suppose they say write a program to find the odd numbers, and you have to use for, else. You have to use for loop and also an else statement. So how do you find odd number? If you divide a number by 2 and if the remainder is not 0, then it's an odd number. For example, 3 if you divide by 2, you get the remainder as 1. Or if you say 21, if you divide by 2, you get the remainder again as 1. So if you divide a number by 2, you have to check the remainder. If it is not 0, that means it's an odd number. So that's the logic. So how do you do it? Is for x in range of, let's say I want to find odd numbers, I want to print odd numbers from 1 to 10. Right? So range from 1 to 10. So 1 comma 10. Now first time, take the first number 1 divided by 2. Basically since I have to check the remainder, you have to use a modulus operator, that's a percentage 2. If the remainder is 0, that means it's an even number, right? So that's why I'm giving pass. Else if it's not 0, I'm going to say that the number is odd. So how am I saying? I'm using x within the curly brackets, and therefore it will say the number would be printed. 1 is odd. Again the loop will repeat. So like this it goes on doing till the range value is 9. So until 9 it will check. Right? 1 is odd, then 1 is odd, 3 is odd, 5 is odd, 7 is odd, 9 is odd. So it keeps printing that. Okay. So this is an example of printing all the odd numbers using for loop as well as else statement. Now coming to the next program. Okay, so these were some of the important programs that I discussed. So let's quickly just revise what kind of important questions will come for the exam in this module. So they can ask you to describe the different types of conditional statements. So if they ask you to explain the conditional statements, please explain them, give syntax and give one example. The next one is develop a Python program to generate n elements in the Fibonacci series. Try to do this program and execute. Different types of looping statements, we just discussed them. So when they ask you to explain any looping statements, explain the concept, give the syntax, give a program, and if possible give a flowchart. Only then you get full marks. The next one is control statements. Write a Python program which reads a word or a sentence as an input and count the frequency of each vowel, number of digits, white space and total number of consonants. Try these programs. In my next video I will be giving answers for all of these, but expect that you try all these things on your own. By next video you can see I'll be giving solutions for all these programs. Explain jumping statements, which we discussed just now, break, continue, pass. Define forming conditions. We discussed about forming conditions in the beginning of this class. And then built-in functions for looping. I told you there are 68 looping built-in functions in Python for looping. And one more program, they can ask you to find whether a given alphabet is vowel or not using the if-else statements. And they also ask you to explain inline if with examples. Inline if was discussed in the previous video. Program to sort 4 numbers using minimum number of ifs. So I will be discussing answer for all these programs in my next video, but until then you try it. Program to check if a given number is palindrome or not using the OR operator and percentage operator. And also they can give you some pseudocodes, right? They can ask you to find out the errors in the code. So there is a program which is given here, find out the error. Or they can ask you to predict the output. They'll ask you, give you some code, they will ask you to predict the output. The answers to this question I'll be discussing in the next video. So until then, you try this. So this video was basically a quick recap or a revision for the looping statements in module 2. So kindly go through all these concepts, and let's meet in the next video where I will be discussing the answers for all these important questions for exams. Thank you so much.